Welcome to our educational session today, covering the topic of hiring international Mavericks, what employers should know. We greatly appreciate the many employers that are with us today and that have registered and are interested in this topic. We appreciate you being willing to engage in learning about recruiting international students. We recognize that your time is very valuable. So if you would like to have your camera on, fantastic. We did keep this as a meeting versus a webinar because we wanted to build a connection with you. And we want to be able to have an open dialogue at the end when we have our open question and answer time. And so feel free to have your cameras on or off during this time and keep your mics muted during this time as well. And then at the end, when we get to the question and answer time, you are welcome to put questions into the chat box or raise your hand or unmute your mic to ask questions as well. A few other notes, today's session is being recorded. Just so that you all are aware, you'll have a copy. I'll send out a link to the recording after this session for you as well. Okay. With that, we'll do some introductions very briefly here. My name is Katie Hodgson. I'm an assistant director at the Career Development Center here at Minnesota State University, Mankato. My role, or the Career Development Center's role with employers and recruitment, is really a connecting point between you and the students or programs and various ways that you can be connected with recruiting our students and fulfilling your talent needs. With that, I'll go ahead and have my colleagues introduce themselves and a little bit about their role on this topic. So Erin or JC, you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Katie. Thanks everyone for joining us today. I'm JC Fry. I'm the director of the Kearney International Center at Minnesota State Mankato. And we recruit all of the international students that come to the university at the undergraduate and graduate level. We provide their advising as far as immigration and cultural adjustment, and also at the point of when they're looking for employment and that work authorization. And I'll pass it over to Erin.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Schutte Wadzinski, and I am attorney and owner of Kivu Immigration Law in my hometown of Worthington, Minnesota. I represent immigrants and their families on all sorts of immigration cases, ranging from humanitarian-related asylum applications to all the way to representing employers on trying to fill their employment needs for their companies. So I look forward to speaking with you today about international talent. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks for those introductions. And I appreciate everyone that has been able to put their title or their role into the chat box to see who else is with us today. So if you have not already done so, please go ahead and put your own title or role into the chat box. I see we have quite a few talent acquisition specialists, recruiters, and a few HR individuals with us today too. The agenda for today is to talk about the importance of international talent recruitment. Why is that important? Understanding our MSU Mankato's international population, the paths of hiring international talent. That's really the heart of today's educational session, and providing you some resources or references that are mentioned today, and then an open question and answer time. From the Career Development Center, as I said, we serve as a connecting point with employers. So as employers are reaching out to us in our space, it is very clear to us what the data is saying. From Minnesota Deed, the 2022 projections report, they've stated that there's a record level of job postings, but a shortage of available workers. At 1.8%, Minnesota set a new record for lowest unemployment rate in June and July. It was not just the lowest rate in state history, it was also the lowest rate any state in the US has ever reported. And by several measures, Minnesota is proving to have one of the tightest labor markets in the US, including nearly 4 job vacancies for every unemployed job seeker. And this is, I'm sure, no surprise to many of you who are the recruiters or talent acquisition specialists in the space, that you all have jobs and positions that are continuing to be created and you need to fill them, and yet there's less or seemingly less people that we're able to fulfill in those roles. One population that I think people have maybe not looked at or considered, or there's a lot of myths and misunderstandings on how to recruit them, is our international students. International students account for 74% of the full-time graduate students in electrical engineering, 72% in computer and information sciences, as well as 50 to 70% in fields that include mathematics and material sciences. Across the US universities. So this is important to know that there are many international students nationwide, and a lot of them tend to study in the STEM fields or in certain areas. According to ICEF, which is our leading source of market intelligence for the international student recruitment industry, if given the chance, 80% of international students would stay in the United States to start their careers after graduating. And the same 80% end up returning home, mainly because of immigration hurdles around the inability to find work. So there's a huge disconnect there. They want to stay, they want to be working here. And we see that reflected in our events at MSU Mankato. So our recent fall annual 2022 Career and Internship Expo event, we saw 41% of the attendees. We had about 1,000 attendees between day 1 and day 2. And a majority of international students attended on day 1, and 41% of them were international students. So they're seeking opportunities and they're eager to be working. Interestingly enough, the National Association for Colleges and Employers, they put out a report and they survey employers and students every year. And in 2020, they did a specific poll on understanding what employers' plans were regarding hiring international students. And as we look at the different regions, you can see that the region that we are in, the Greater Lakes, is at 5.9%, which is significantly lower than our fellow regions around the United States. So we're really behind the mark in having intentional plans to inquire or pursue our international students for hire. Now, why is this really important besides the fact that you have a hiring need and they're willing to work? There's a lot of benefits from hiring international students. One of the quotes that I found, again, from our NACE friends, a fellow career professional, talked about thinking about it as your stock portfolio for your company. Diversity, hiring international students increases your diversity, which can increase your performance. In 2017, a Boston consulting group surveyed 1,700 companies in 8 countries to research the benefits of diversity. The group's study established that diverse teams drive innovation and that they produce 19% more revenue than their non-diverse counterparts. When employers think about diversity, they often think about domestic talent. Hiring international graduates, however, can fulfill a whole host of diversity initiatives and needs, from nationality to religion to language, race, ethnicity. Each of you probably have your own unique diversity needs or gaps that you're needing to fulfill. 71.8% of students are seeking employers that embrace diversity, and 88.4% of employers nationwide have some sort of formal diversity recruiting effort, according to NACE's 2021 annual reports. So again, one of the major benefits is related to diversity and the ideas of bringing different perspectives to your team, increasing their performance, diverse thinking styles and experiences, having different approaches to problem solving. It also can enhance your economic, scientific, and technological competitiveness through increased diversity in research, innovation, and knowledge. And there's a global impact. So it's increasing understanding and knowledge of markets in students' home countries as well. So understanding their perspective in their areas and their markets, and using their networks as part of your network.
All right, thank you, Katie. I'm going to give you a few little snapshots of what we have at our university for international students. This fall, we have 1,412 international students registered for courses at the university. So that's F1 student visa holders, J1 student visa holders, English language learners, undergraduate, graduate, and here is the breakdown of those different populations. So we have 1,069 students here who are pursuing an undergraduate degree, a bachelor's degree. We have 248 students who are pursuing a higher degree of that, so master's or doctorate. We have 51 students here who are just here learning English to then springboard into their next degree plan. We have 44 students here who are exchange students here for 1 semester or 2, and they're from a partner institution somewhere else outside the US. And then we have 299 students who are still connected to us, and they are currently working on optional practical training, which is still an F1 student benefit, but it's after they've graduated. And then over here on the right, just to give you a better visual of what that looks like. So the bulk of our students are here getting an undergraduate degree, and they'll be with us for 4 to 5 years. This demographic below of the countries that are represented, this number, these countries change. Just recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, Ethiopia has become our top sender, and then Nepal, South Korea, Japan, India, and Saudi Arabia. And that looks like 6 countries and not 5. Okay, we'll move to the next slide. Our top programs or colleges are often business, science, engineering and technology, aviation and nursing, and the breakdown is right in front of you. In the College of Business, we have 26 accounting majors and 29 marketing majors. Just in the science, engineering and technology program, we have 232 students who are focusing on some form of information technology or data science, computer engineering. Many, if not all of these programs that our students are in require or offer an internship experience. So they need to get their feet wet and get into the industry that they're pursuing their degree in and get some work experience. And so we can talk about that on the next slide. Our students are eligible for something called curricular practical training. And so think of this in terms of an internship. And so this is available to our F1 students who are seeking their degree, and it has to be an integral part of their established curriculum. So it has to be something that's required for them to complete their program. At MSU, we oftentimes tie that to a course or some credits that are part of their course catalog and that are counting towards the degree requirements for them to graduate. During the academic year, they can fall and spring semesters. They can do that for 20 hours a week or less. They can do full-time, 21 hours a week or more during the summers. And then there's a co-op experience, which is fully immersive, full-time, like 100% of their time. And that can be done in fall, summer, or spring. You can see the next slide. Okay, I covered that up just a little bit already. Again, so part-time is during their spring and fall semesters, full-time is during summer or their final semester, and the co-op experience is full-time for up to 2 terms. They must complete 2 academic semesters in order for them to be eligible. They have to have a job offer that is related to their program or their major. They need to be registered for the course that's associated with that training experience. And they need to have the support and approval from their academic department. So CPT is a really excellent opportunity for our students to get some work experience in their field of study. We do get a lot of students that join us and they've never actually even had a job. So they're already starting a little bit behind than some of our American and domestic students. The application for CPT is free. They don't have to pay an application fee. The processing time is relatively quick. It's done in my office, and we will authorize that employment. The employer has to file an I-9, a W-4, et cetera, the normal employment documents that they use when they bring on an employee. The benefit of the CPT for our students is that they can build their resume and they can start making relationships and connections with different industries or different companies in the industry, which could potentially launch them into a career once they've graduated. Students can use CPT on a part-time basis, relatively unlimited, as long as they're following the requirements of their program, and they're registered for the appropriate course. We don't want students to accumulate more than 364 days of full-time CPT. If they do that, it would make them ineligible for their next employment opportunity. So when you're thinking about some of the positions that you have available in your department, if it makes sense for it to be a learning opportunity and an internship, this might be a great way to increase the diversity of your staff and bring on a very eager and willing and smart staff person to help round out your team. And I think I will be handing it over to Erin next.
All right. Thank you, JC, and thank you, Katie. I think that gives a really good overview of the potential, the hiring potential of international students, specifically from MSU Mankato. I want to just make a clarification about the difference between international students and immigrant students. You may think of, asylum seekers or refugees as international students, but they're specifically international students are students who come to the United States specifically to study on a student visa. So when we mention F1s and J1s, those are types of student visas that students will apply for in their home country, have an interview at a US embassy, and get a stamp and a visa to travel to the United States specifically to study. There are some restrictions on what international students can do when they're in the United States. And one of those restrictions is that they cannot work off campus unless they get special permission. So when JC is talking about CPT, for example, and the types of things that I'll be talking about, the international student must take some steps in order to get that permission to work off campus. I completely understand that those steps sound scary to employers, and employers may want to not touch that with a 10-foot pole, but we are here to say that employers, you can do it. And in fact, there may not be any steps that employers even need to take in order to hire these international students. When JC mentions that you don't need to take any additional steps for CPT, that is the same thing for optional practical training, which is employment opportunities for international students after they graduate from college, or in some cases, summer internships in between their academic years. Optional practical training provides international students and graduates the opportunity to work for 1 to 3 years in the United States on this sort of status where that they remain connected to their university. And employers do not pay any fees for hiring international students on OPT. So optional practical training is an opportunity for employers to hire international students at no extra cost to the employer. There's not even any extra paperwork that an employer must take care of, because it's the Career Development Center and the International Student Office of the student's university that is going to handle the paperwork, and the student will cover any costs associated with that process. It is the role for the partnership that really exists here is between the student and the student's university to get them eligible for optional practical training and employment in the United States. So the employer comes into play when they are looking to hire, and as long as that international student has an employment authorization card, which is an example is shown on the screen here, along with a social security card, they are eligible for employment in the United States. This employment authorization card will show a duration of time where the student is eligible to work. So if it is standard OPT, it's going to be good for 1 year. You'll see, in this example, it's not realistic, but in real life, you would see valid from one date, and then the card expires 1 year later. And that's the window for which someone on OPT can legally work in the United States. For an international student who has a STEM major or has studied science, technology, engineering, or math, they will be eligible for a 2-year extension beyond those initial 12 months of OPT, making it possible for an employer to employ that international student for a combined total of 36 months, as long as that student has a bachelor's degree in a STEM field. What is STEM? You could have a whole nother conversation about that, but there are resources online that state very specifically what majors are considered STEM. So if you have questions about that, during Q&A, I'll try and put the resource into the chat box for what majors are considered STEM and therefore can be hired on OPT, not just for 12 months, but a total of 36 months. Next slide, please. All right, so OPT is a really good opportunity for employers to kind of test the waters with employees and see, is this international student an employee that you really want to retain? Take advantage of the opportunity to hire students on OPT because there's not a lot of risk or even extra risk that you're taking with hiring an international student versus a US citizen. And for those international students who you've hired, who you love and want to retain, there are opportunities for you to work with the immigration system to provide a visa for that international student to maintain lawful status to work in the United States. Now, you may have heard of H-1Bs. There are many of you who are in HR and have perhaps facilitated these before. But for those of you who aren't familiar with H-1B visas, it's a 3-year work visa, which is able to be renewed once for a total of 6 years. And it's important to note that this is a temporary work visa, so it doesn't lead anywhere without an additional pathway one way or another, but it would essentially kind of extend the circumstances that an employee would otherwise be in on OPT. Unlike OPT, where it's really the relationship between the employee or the student and the university, with an H-1B, the employer is going to be in the driver's seat. And the employer is going to, have to cover the costs associated with an H-1B visa. And typically, employers will work with an immigration law firm to just conduct this process or facilitate it, handle all of the paperwork because it is somewhat complex. And you want to have a strong understanding of the immigration system in order for this to be successful. But it is often worth the time and worth the effort for the retention. And I encourage people to first of all, explore options with international students through OPT. And if you find someone who you really like, don't be afraid to go through the process of filing for an H-1B visa or an immigrant-based visa, which I'll talk about in a moment. For an H-1B visa, your employee must have at least a bachelor's degree or higher. So we're talking about H-1Bs for professional workers. There are other kinds of visas for lower skilled workers, but given that we're talking about international students here, the majority of them who are in bachelor programs, an H-1B is a good option. The cost for an H-1B to the employer is going to depend on how many visas you need and what the time frame is. There is kind of a fast track and a slow track, and the government charges different fees based on what track you want to pursue. Therefore, it's probably going to cost between $4,000 and $7,000 per visa, or in other words, per employee who you want to hire. Now that is a rough estimate, and different attorneys will give you different costs depending on their own legal fees as well. But the 4,000 to 7,000 is what generally comes out to when I represent an employer who wants to hire someone on an H-1B. One of the struggles that I want to mention with an H-1B process is this lottery system. So there's kind of two different tracks for an H-1B. One track is for nonprofits and government agencies, and the other track is for everyone else, private industry, essentially. And for private industry to obtain an H-1B visa for an employee, they have to enter a lottery, and because there is a cap to the number of H-1B visas that the government will issue each year. And in order to win the lottery, it seems like large corporations who can enter the lottery, hundreds, if not thousands of times, are luckier when it comes to getting picked for H-1B visas in the lottery. It can be really an uphill and frustrating battle for small companies who maybe only want to hire 1 or 2 or 3 H-1Bs, and then none of those 3 applications get selected in the lottery. Therefore, I like H-1Bs specifically for nonprofit organizations, government agencies, and I forgot to mention, importantly, universities and public schools. So public schools, I know you're out there. I know there are teacher shortages, and H-1B is a really, really good opportunity for you, and universities as well. You are not subject to the cap. Therefore, you do not need to enter the lottery in order to apply for an H-1B. It's skipping a step and is not having to deal with the uncertainty of that lottery. You can go to the next slide. So for private industry who, you want to make an investment in an employee, you want to retain them, but you're afraid of that lottery, which I sometimes am too, I will often advise just go straight ahead into submitting an application for an employment-based immigrant visa for your employee. And rather than an H-1B temporary work visa, which is good for no more than 6 years, the employment-based immigrant visa process is a one-time deal. And in the end, the individual, your employee, will get a green card. On your screen is an example of a green card, and this is permanent residency, also known as an EB, which is an employment-based immigrant visa. Again, the process for this is employer driven, and the employer would likely engage with an immigration law firm to facilitate this process. One step with this is that the employer must demonstrate to the Department of Labor that you're unable to fill the position with an American citizen worker. This precautionary measure is put in place just to ensure that foreign workers are not taking the jobs of American citizens. But in this day and age, at least in greater Minnesota, where many of my clients reside, we're seeing that with the labor shortages, it is not hard to demonstrate to the Department of Labor that you have positions that are unable to be filled by qualified, able, and willing American workers. There are different categories of employment-based immigrant visas, and one role of the immigration attorney is to figure out, what positions are you looking to hire and what category would those positions best be fit. So the categories vary based on the job description's required level of education and required level of experience. And so I work with employers to figure out, okay, how many people do you want to hire for a particular position? Do you already have people in mind who you want to hire? That's often the case if you have international students on OPT who you want to retain. And so we have that dialogue before we take the necessary steps to obtain that labor certification process or certificate from the Department of Labor, giving you the go-ahead to fill the position with a foreign worker. That foreign worker or your employee or prospective employee would then fill out the application for permanent residency, which is a step that often is also navigated with the help of an immigration attorney. The cost for an immigrant, an employment-based immigrant visa, these EB visas that we're talking about, again, varies based on how quickly you need the visa and whether you're going to be in that fast lane or short lane with the government, fast lane or slow lane. But we're seeing that it's costing between $8,000 and $12,000 per employee. Now, when you think about, well, what else you are offering to attract or retain employees, you're thinking about sign-on bonuses, you're thinking about, potential opportunity costs when it comes to high turnover and training new employees. And so I'm seeing a trend where employers are becoming more receptive to the idea of making that investment in international students and foreign workers, because they really do want to retain and attract the best talent possible. So, these are steps that are very, very manageable for employees when it comes to logistics and processes. I think we all want to dispel the myth that this is a very scary process, and it can work out. We are here to support you as employers and answer your questions, and hopefully make this a seamless opportunity for you to fill some of your needs in your company. So I think that kind of hopefully gives you an overview of just some snippets of the immigration system that are particularly relevant to hiring international students. And, as we carry on our dialogue this afternoon, I'm more than happy to answer questions now over Zoom. But I'll also put my email address in the chat box, and you can reach out to me directly if you wish. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. I am just sharing on the screen some of the references that we use today before we jump into the Q&A. So that'll be the extra fun part. In the chat box, I am putting a flyer that Erin so graciously put together for our career fair this year that helps you to understand that breakdown and different roles and responsibilities in those hiring processes. I will, as a follow-up to this session, provide these links to you, because I understand that many of you in this Zoom room are not the decision makers within your employer. And so as you try to present cases to them of why this is important and how this is important, I think it's important to present some of that data. And so if you need some additional support with that, again, those direct resources will be available to you. One other thing that I just wanted to show you before we jump into the Q&A spot, I'm going to exit out of the PowerPoint for just a minute here and do a new share and show you a spot on our Career Development Center website of where you can find some follow-up information on recruitment with students. So if you go to our Career Development Center website, there is a specific tab that is meant for employers. And within there, you can find the different ways that you can recruit, both via Handshake as our hiring platform, as well as on-campus recruitment. And there is a guide to hiring international students. It's very similar to the handout that's provided in the chat box, but something that may be helpful where you can be connected as kind of a reminder of your role versus the student's role in each of those breakout types. I do see at least one question in the chat that said, are you able to share the flyer? Absolutely. I will share the flyer along with a recording and these links from today too. So with that, I'd love for us to just open it back up to question and answer time. I see that there were a few questions already into the chat here. One of them, Claire had asked a question that I know, Erin, you kind of semi-addressed is the STEM major designation determined by each school or by the federal government? Erin, do you have any other insights about how that works?
Yes, the determination of whether a major is STEM or not is determined by the federal government. But my understanding is that universities have a little bit of flexibility in how they code their majors in order for those majors as code to line up with what the federal government requirements are.
Thank you. Another question from Chase was, can you confirm what the category portion means on the EAD cards? We've seen them many times before, but don't have a full understanding of what they mean.
Yes. So as an employer, I think it's the most important message for me to convey to you is that the category code probably doesn't matter to you. And instead you want to just look at the validity of the card, the dates. But it's a good question, for your curiosity, what do the category codes mean? And there are many, many ways for individuals to obtain employment authorization. So each code means a different eligibility category. And for an individual who is on OPT, that category code is probably going to be CO3B. If someone is still a college student and is using OPT during the summertime for a summer internship, the category code is going to be CO3A. Other category codes that you may see would be C08 for asylum seekers, or like C09 is the category code for someone who has already applied for permanent residency and is waiting for their green card application to be decided by the government. So there's many codes, but it's going to be C03 something if it's OPT.
Thank you. There was another question about the cost for getting an H-1B visa, but I believe you covered that right after the question was asked. So Erin, who asked the question in the chat box, if that Erin has any follow-up questions, please feel free to put that back in. When would you apply for the H-1B when an employee is on OPT? What's the ideal timeline?
I really encourage employers to have a check-in with the employee kind of around their 6-month mark in order for you to have an honest conversation with that employee on OPT to determine, hopefully by that time you've gotten a good sense of, is this someone who you want to retain? And at that point, hopefully you'll be engaging the employee on whether or not they would be interested in continuing with you as their employer. The sooner you start the process, the better. I talk about this fast lane and slow lane and how whichever lane you're in, the price is dependent on. And in order to get into the fast lane, there's a $2,500 additional processing fee. It's called the premium processing fee, and that is a government processing fee. So what that premium processing fee allows is that the government, you're guaranteed a decision by the government within 15 business days, which is great, but you're paying for it. And if you don't have to pay to be in that speedy lane, you essentially are saving $2,500 per visa application.
Thank you. Richard Ash in the chat asked, are there certain time frames or deadlines to the process? Richard, I don't know if you have a specific portion, if that's in reference to the H-1B visa or any other clarification to that question. You're welcome to unmute your mic if you'd like.
Thank you. I was thinking more of the H-1B process.
So you don't want your employee on OPT to fall out of status before they get their H-1B visa. And in order to do that, I think if someone is on a 12-month OPT, you want to probably begin that process around that 6-month time frame. If you can begin it earlier, that's all the better. But if an employee is at risk of like losing their status and saying that the H-1B is not being processed quickly enough, there is a way that the student or the employee can apply for an extension, but it's not guaranteed. So you just kind of want to, the best practice is to apply and start the process as soon as you know that you want to pursue the H-1B.
There was another related question in the chat about what about the December graduates? When should we start the application process? I would say that's probably similar to the 6-month timeline that you're sharing. Erin, do you have kind of related to that also any insights if a student has less than a 12-month OPT experience with an employer, if 6 months doesn't feel like a doable time frame and they need just a little bit longer?
Then that's perfectly fine. I think you'll just have to swallow the premium processing fee in order to try and alleviate any gap in status. And as an employer, like you can only hire individuals who have lawful status. So it is in your interest to help arrange it in a way where your employees are not falling out of status.
And this last question, the deadline to submit is in March. Is that correct?
So this is likely pertaining to the H-1B lottery. So yes, if you are in private industry wishing to enter the H-1B lottery, there are deadlines throughout the year in order to get your entries into the lottery. So that time frame is in March, and for like fall hiring. So that's something where you just want to come up with a pretty good plan and have your ducks in a row if you're a private industry needing to enter the lottery for H-1Bs.
So for December graduates, we would need to submit by March 2023 is what the statement says.
If your intent is to hire a graduate straight into H-1B, yes. But remember that person is going to have OPT for at least 1 year as well.
Thank you. We've actually caught up with all the questions in the chat. Is there anybody else that would like to unmute their mic and ask a question, or any other questions that you'd like to add into the chat for today?
Hi, I have a question about the CPT. So just to clarify, if we would hire somebody with the CPT, you mentioned there was a max amount of hours that they could work, but is that like, can they do work under the CPT for like till they're done with school, or is that just for a semester, or like how far can they do that as far as length and time?
That's a really good question. We approve CPT on a semester basis. And so it would be attached to a course that they're registered for each authorization period, so each semester. Part-time CPT, so 20 hours a week or less, can be done as often and as much as needed. They cannot work more than 364 days of full-time CPT without it impacting OPT. So if it really depends on the program and the student's needs as far as completing those internship requirements. So I'll put my email address in the chat here too. If you want to connect directly with me, we could talk that through a little bit further.
Thank you.
Is there a process to make a connection with potential students so we could determine if that student would be someone we would want to move forward with?
Yes, I think you would work with the Career Development Center and potentially the department directly. I'm not really sure what field you're looking for, but we really encourage faculty to help make those introductions for our students in the industry for internships and then also post-graduation employment.
We would be looking at health, career, nursing, and so forth.
Yeah, it depends. You know, we have a variety of programs that are set up differently. So I would welcome a conversation if you want to kind of clarify which or talk about what is the best strategy within each of those kind of program areas to help you get connected. So I'll put my email address in the chat box as well.
All right, thank you.
Additional question I received in the chat. At times, students will say they are only authorized to work on campus due to limitations around their authorization. Does that mean they are not eligible for CPT or that they don't know that they are eligible for CPT?
It could be a little bit of both, actually. So students, we keep them informed very early on that they cannot work off campus without authorization. And so they can't just go work at Quick Trip or Pizza Ranch or anything like that as a, you know, an hourly paid worker. They maybe don't know yet that they're eligible for off-campus employment in terms of an internship or curricular practical training. And so our goal is to keep all departments informed of that so they can keep talking to students about that opportunity for them while they're planning out their degree and their coursework. So it could be a little bit of both. If you are approached by an international student who is hesitant about whether or not they have the authorization, encourage them to come back to the KIC, my office, the Kearney International Center, just so that they aren't taking any missteps that could impact their employability later on down the road.
And I will just add that one of the benefits that all F1 students have is the opportunity to apply for OPT and CPT. So it's an automatic benefit of an F1 visa. So yes, I mean, there are exceptions. Maybe it's already used up, or maybe just the student hasn't applied for it, but it is kind of an inherent benefit of the visa.
Another question kind of as a follow-up to it said, how do we connect with faculty? I'm putting a link in the chat that has a list of our internship coordinators. So an important thing to note is that at least internship, so not just thinking about part-time and full-time, but if you're thinking about how do I get connected, usually the department chairs of each program, or specifically the internship coordinators, might be the best place in this case for international talent to connect with. Now, each program at our institution does not necessarily require an internship. I believe JC mentioned that at the beginning. They don't all require it, and how they implement their program looks a little bit different. So to really make sure that you have an internship experience that is set up with a timeline that makes sense with when they are maybe required to have an internship, or when does it work best, even if it's an optional, or choosing that OPT versus CPT, what timelines work best for each program is going to look different. So I would say I start with identifying at least one or two majors or programs that you want to build a connection with. You know, sometimes employers will be like, I want to hire all of them. Well, let's just start with one or two that you want to build those very intentional, strong connections with. Take a look at the internship coordinators list. We do have it organized by our colleges. Keep in mind that I understand that every university and institution names their colleges or names their majors something different, and their colleges and their departments something different. So it could be possible that we have something that you may not know what does it fall under. Our STEM majors or our business majors tend to be a little bit more concrete, whereas that's where we're going to find most of our international student population. But our health majors tend to be a little bit more complicated, which is why I said sometimes that could be an individual conversation with me. So feel free to use the link that I have provided in there to look at our internship coordinators list, to reach out and kind of get connected with them. Our student organization groups can also be fantastic. For instance, we have a data or a dream student organization that's very well developed and well connected with with employers in data, STEM, computer engineering fields, and they have a very high international student population. And so they're eager to invite employers to participate as guest speakers and in different ways. So the RSO groups, internship coordinators, and if you're not sure how to narrow down or who it is that you want to connect with, then you could connect with me, and I'm happy to do an introduction and make sure that we're really identifying what are the efforts, recruitment efforts that you've tried and that we have available to you, and what might be some creative solutions if you're kind of struggling. Good. Any other questions that people have for us today? Okay. Well, we so again appreciate everybody's time participating and listening, and hopefully you have some good takeaways that you can bring to your organization and really have some good discussion about how to intentionally plan for recruiting international talent. We recognize that some of this information, or a good chunk of it, could be a lot to process and take in. So please reach out if you have follow-up questions, and we are happy to answer what you have. Thank you.